Kim Kardashian just did an interview with Elle promoting Nike Skims. And you guys, listen to what she says.
I think people would love to see my brother back on TV and he comes back. Am I allowed to say that? Well, I did. Sorry. It's just fun.
I don't know about you, but the way Kim Kardashian said that makes me feel like Rob Kardashian is making a return. As in, dare I say, well, I'm not gonna say full-time cast member because half the damn family isn't even full-time cast member.
Kim Kardashian just quietly posted a photo of her brother Rob, and the internet instantly performed a collective double take. Because in a culture that treats visibility like currency, a brother showing up in a selfie feels like a headline. Here's the baseline. Kim shared a rare photo that included Rob, outlets called it unexpected, and the reaction was a mix of relief, curiosity, and 1,000 tiny moral debates about privacy and profit. The story that kicked all this off was filed by Yahoo Entertainment, which framed Kim's mention as an unexpected update about Rob and sent ripples through the usual celebrity news ecosystem.
Rob Kardashian is officially returning to reality TV. I repeat, Davidson, Rob Kardashian is going to be featured on the next season of The Kardashians.
But you don't need to be a pop culture scholar to see the two competing instincts in this moment. One wants to celebrate a family snapshot, the other wants to convert that celebration into a storyline that can be sold and streamed.
Khloe and Kim are the only one that actually filmed, but Rob has been featured more on social media and even making appearances on Khloe Kardashian's podcast, where he called in and said that he was okay with filming when he feels good. And he enjoys these moments with his family, but this podcast did not make it seem like we would get anything other than a cameo with a K. But Kimberly Noel, she said they're back. So season 7 better give this. Oh my God, I can't even believe it.
Let's pin down the verifiable stuff. Kim posted a candid photo celebrating Lala Anthony's birthday, and Rob, who has been largely out of public view, appeared in the frame, which led outlets like People and E to publish pieces noting his rare appearance and fans to flood the comments with affection. The image is banal in composition, but heavy in context. A simple smile, a cap, a dark shirt, and yet that smallness is what made it feel enormous. When a public person steps back, their re-emergence reads as a public event even if it was a private moment. If you want history, Rob's absence didn't happen overnight. He drifted off screen after the whirlwind of Rob in China and a series of legal and personal entanglements that made public life less tenable and private life more precious. Multiple outlets have chronicled how Rob has prioritized fatherhood and his own well-being, and how he's described being uncomfortable with cameras. That candidness about body image and comfort appeared in interviews and in a rare appearance on Khloe's podcast, which contextualizes this moment rather well. Here's an ethical spine to hold on to. Fame can be addictive for audiences and corrosive for people. Honoring someone's choice to step away from a spotlight that once paid dividends is a civic act of empathy, not a moral failure we should punish with endless curiosity. And yet, the Kardashian family has spent decades monetizing intimacy. So when one member asks for privacy, the fan base is left with whiplash. They are both used to receiving unfettered access and trained to expect spectacle on demand. Kim is central to how this plays out because her social media is a megaphone. A casual caption from her is functionally editorial, and that means the family controls the volume and cadence of appearances in a way most families do not. The media's choice to label the moment unexpected is performative theater. It packages a slow drip of intermittent visibility into a sudden event because headlines need spikes and algorithms love heat. Parade and other outlets noted the surprise, and that surprised framing sells clicks. But context matters. Rob's public sightings have been intermittent over the years, with Easter photos and occasional candid cameos, so the narrative of gone versus back is exaggerated. To read this moment only as a potential ratings play is cynical, but not wrong. The family has a pattern of using personal milestones to stitch together arcs that become seasons of content, and that pattern creates incentives both to protect and to publicize. We have to parse the duality. Family members are humans making choices, and also assets in a media portfolio. Those truths are not mutually exclusive, they just coexist uncomfortably. Let me be direct. Rob's decision to retreat from cameras has to be understood through the lens of trauma, litigation, and body image struggles that were amplified on reality TV and in tabloids. And that amplification matters when you think about why someone might want to parent from a quieter life. One of the stickiest threads here is how fans responded. A blend of genuine relief and a kind of proprietary fandom where the public treats access like a purchased right. There's genuine warmth in the comments, and there's entitlement too. This is also a masculinity story. Men are permitted fewer exits from the spectacle economy without suspicion. When male celebrities vanish, the narrative often assumes scandal, addiction, or rage. Rarely does it assume conscious boundary setting and self-care. Rob's choices force a cultural question. Can a person be famous and private at the same time? Or does fame demand continuous performance until you are either rehabilitated or archived? Our answer to that question shapes the ethics of coverage. There's a practical industry angle. Networks and producers love comeback arcs. They are neat, sellable, and predictable, but ethical production requires consent and agency, not scripted comebacks engineered by pressure and money. You should watch how reporters phrase their sentences. There's a difference between Rob was seen and Rob resurfaced, and language shifts the frame from human to headline. Nuance matters, and it's often the first thing eliminated in a breaking feed. I'm not arguing the press should bury news. I'm arguing for proportion. A photo can be reported on without being sensationalized into a narrative that robs the subject of agency. Historically, the Kardashian machine has been skilled at turning reconciliation into narrative beats, arguments, reconciliations, transformations, and those beats sell catharsis. But not every human experience needs to be engineered into catharsis for viewer satisfaction. If Rob were to rejoin a show, producers would design the arc, the setup, the conflict, the therapy, the triumph. That's not inherently bad if Rob consents and controls the terms, but it becomes exploitative if consent is assumed or compressed for a deadline. Khloe's public remarks are interesting. She said that she believes Rob might return if he's comfortable, play into both the support narrative and the possibility of content. Family hope can be honest and strategic at the same time, which is messy but realistic.
Do you think Rob will ever come back to the show?
I do think Rob would come back to the show. He talks about it a lot. He does. But I do know Rob has been through a lot personally, and I know that he's just feeling really good about himself, and I'm happy for him.
Let's talk about audience responsibility for 5 seconds. Clicks create incentives, comments create markets, and trends create programming. If audiences demand spectacle, media provides it. If audiences demand restraint, media will eventually adapt. There's a performative kindness industry online that converts vulnerability into moral capital, where thoughts and prayers posts rack up engagement and social points while doing very little for the person involved. That's why the small, quiet move, a single photo shared by a sister, matters. It's a calibrated release that signals affection without opening the floodgates. And if the public can learn to accept that calibration, we can push back on the machine. But here's the countervailing force. Tabloids and sensational outlets will run the story as Rob returns or Rob resurfaces because superlatives drive ad dollars and engagement metrics, not because those frames respect lived reality. We should ask, who benefits from turning this into a 3-act television arc? The family might, the networks might, but more importantly, the audience benefits emotionally. They get an arc to consume, which is seductive and enervating in equal measure. Rob has been seen in a handful of family photos this year, including an Easter post and the Lala Anthony birthday snaps, which suggest a pattern of selective visibility rather than a dramatic disappearance followed by a sudden return. In fact, people in InStyle both covered the Lala Anthony birthday selfie and noted Rob's rare presence. And those pieces help us map the timeline of his visibility instead of treating it as a single rupture. So why did Yahoo frame it as unexpected? Because surprise is clickable. Unexpected implies drama. But if you stitch together the intermittent family posts, a picture of slow re-engagement emerges, not a headline-ready comeback. There's a broader cultural lesson in this. Privacy has been weaponized against celebrities as a sign of weakness when really it can be a practice of preservation and parenting. Rob choosing Dream over the camera is a moral stance in a culture that fetishizes exposure. Think about how we narrativize suffering. We often demand spectacle to validate empathy. We want a visible arc because an arc is emotionally tidy. Messy, ongoing lives make for worse television and better human thriving. This moment also reveals how family dynamics get funneled into public narratives. A sister's small act of sharing becomes a press release because the family's brand conflates personal affection and public announcement, and that conflation complicates consent. Which brings me to Kim specifically. Her public identity has evolved from reality star to entrepreneur, advocate, and cultural curator. And that positioning gives her statements extra reach and responsibility when they touch private family matters. She's also someone who's lived through violence and theft in the public eye. Her 2016 Paris robbery still resonates in how she navigates security and disclosure. And that history makes controlled sharing feel like sound risk management, not mere PR. This is a moment to interrogate media literacy. Read celebrity updates skeptically, ask who benefits, and separate verified facts from spicy spins. The verified facts here are straightforward. A photo was posted, Rob appeared, and outlets noted its rarity. Outlets like E! And Parade amplified the story in ways that reveal industry mechanics. They supply the context, but sometimes the headlines do the heavy lifting of excitation, and the pieces follow to justify it. We should also talk about men and body image because Rob has spoken about being uncomfortable in his skin. That's vital context. It reframes his absence as a proactive measure rather than a scandal or estrangement. There's a cultural shortfall when we treat male vulnerability as entertainment or spectacle. Allowing someone to heal off-camera disrupts the default script of performative resilience that we too often expect from public men. If you're wondering whether Rob's appearances will become regular, my take is incremental and cautious. Small peaks, family dinners, selective glimpses timed around personal milestones, not a sudden full-season comeback. Why? Because gradual exposure preserves agency and gives the person control to decide what to reveal and when. That control is the inverse of the historical exploitation that often defines celebrity rehabilitation narratives. Also, keep in mind the child at the center of many decisions. Rob is a father, and his choices about visibility ripple through Dream's life. Privacy can be an act of protection, not avoidance, and that reality should shape how the public responds. We're at a moment where the audience can actually influence ethical coverage by not clicking on the most salacious headlines, by favoring context-rich pieces, and by responding to family posts with support rather than conjecture. Fans can change incentives. That's a small ask, but a consequential one. Media organizations are responsive to audience behavior, and if attention shifts from spectacle to nuance, editorial choices will follow, slowly but surely. Let's do a quick media taxonomy. There are outlets that will sensationalize this into a comeback narrative, outlets that will contextualize it with timelines and interviews, and outlets that will do both depending on headline pressure and ad cycles. The responsible consumer reads the timeline, checks the quotes, and notices whether reporting differentiates between verifiable statements and speculation. That practice is basic media hygiene in an attention economy that rewards emotion over context. If you want emotional truth, treat this photo as what it likely was, a familial gesture, not a press conference. That difference is ethical and practical. It keeps the human subject at the center instead of the headline. There will be people who argue that fans deserve closure and that family brands feed livelihoods. Those points matter. But consent and mental health are non-negotiable ethical constraints that shouldn't be negotiated away for the sake of ratings. Ask yourself whether you would want your moments to become commodity. The answer often reframes how you feel about clicking through and amplifying a private gesture into a public narrative. In the long view, this is a footnote in Kardashian family history, a reminder that fame mutates over time. Some members double down, some retreat, and the family's public identity is a collage of those choices. The brand will survive either way. The cultural question is what kind of precedent we set for privacy, consent, and the commodification of pain. Will we normalize retreat as a healthy choice or penalize it as narrative failure? If we normalize retreat, we allow other public figures the dignity to repair away from cameras. If we penalize it, we incentivize performative returns and exploitative arcs. That's the policy decision of attention economies. Now let's be realistic. Snippets of a private life will leak, tabloids will speculate, and streaming platforms will always hunger for a hook. The job of conscientious consumers and journalists is to slow that hunger down and prioritize agency over appetites. I want to call out one more thing: the role of language. The verbs we choose matter. Resurfaced versus seen versus returned carry different weights. Sensational verbs manufacture momentum. Precise verbs preserve nuance. For those tracking the timeline, this year included at least 2 public glimpses of Rob in family photos, and Khloe's public commentary that she hopes he might return at his own pace is part of the supportive framing the family has been crafting. People and InStyle documented the timeline of photographs and comments, which is useful because it reminds us that public presence has been intermittent and voluntary, not a single dramatic rupture. If you're skeptical about motives, that's valid. Skepticism keeps power in check. But skepticism that becomes speculation without evidence can be cruel, especially when the subject has been candid about discomfort and boundaries. There's a humane practice available. Celebrate the smallness of the moment, offer quiet support, and resist the impulse to demand a full confessional arc. That practice is radical in a noisier media landscape. I respect the family's right to create content and the individual's right to privacy in equal measure. The two can coexist if everyone remembers who the real person is behind the publicity and who must consent to being part of a narrative. To the journalists out there, report the facts, give timelines, cite interviews, and resist the temptation to inflate ordinary family communication into headline events. Readers deserve clarity over heat. To the fans, your compassion can be active and quiet. It doesn't have to be performative. Kindness is not content. It's a practice that protects people, particularly children, from the collateral damage of exposure. The likely scenario going forward is steady, selective visibility. Family dinners, birthdays, occasional social media photos, maybe an audio appearance on a sister's podcast, all gestures that allow Rob to remain close without being consumed by the machinery of fame. And if he chooses to return to screens for reasons of his choosing, that decision will be one of many authentic paths he can take, but it should be his path, not an answer to a public demand or a production memo. What this moment reveals about us is more interesting than what it reveals about them. We're hungry for tidy narratives, and that hunger is exploitable. The better cultural instinct is patience, and the better civic habit is restraint. Ultimately, this was a gentle sisterly gesture that the press elevated into a story because the press is structured to do so. We can respond differently by refusing the salacious framing and honoring the human reality instead. If you're still scrolling for drama, consider pausing and reflecting on what compassion would look like in the comments. It might be boring, but it will be kinder and more interesting in the long run. We used to insist celebrities were public property. Now, we're painfully aware that they are people with boundaries. The cultural project here is to move from consumption to caretaking, without making caretaking into another consumable. So here's the take. Celebrate the smile, respect the boundary, and don't weaponize empathy into content. That small stance moves us closer to a healthier attention culture, one photo at a time. If you like this kind of sharp cultural take, subscribe, ring the bell icon, and drop a comment, but do it kindly. Our headlines are loud, but our responses don't have to be. This moment is a test of our cultural imagination. Can we allow people to be private without turning it into a cliffhanger? Small acts of privacy are not plot twists. They are boundaries that deserve respect. A family photograph need not be deconstructed for content. Sometimes it's just a connection. The internet's hunger for narrative should not override a person's right to heal quietly. Practice restraint. Celebrate without interrogating. Support without weaponizing.